I just want to bring in our legal analyst as well, former prosecutor Sonny Hostin and criminal defense attorney Mark NeJame, who are also in Sanford, Florida. And I'd like to give both of you an opportunity to really assess what we've heard here, particularly when you see Detective Doris Singleton's testimony. Does it strike you, Sonny, that because George Zimmerman is so calm that he doesn't seem to be freaking out when he's explaining all the details and how this happened, that he is very confident in his version of the story and therefore others in the jury will be as well?
Well, no. I mean, that cuts both ways, because if the government finds him in inconsistencies, remember, he hasn't just given one statement, he's given several, I think 3 or 4 by my count. If the government points out a lot of inconsistencies or lies, then the jury may think, oh my goodness, he is a cold-blooded liar. And so that sort of cuts both ways. But let me tell you a bit about my observations. I was in the courtroom during this, and I will tell you the jurors were leaning forward. They were taking a lot of notes, which was very interesting. And by my count, I would say about 2 of them started looking directly at George Zimmerman when his audio recording was being played. And I think what we need to also keep in mind is it's not just inconsistencies that the government is looking for. They're also looking for what he actually said. Remember, he called Trayvon Martin a suspect, and those were his words, not the words of the police officer. And so, you know, you could see that the government was asking those kinds of questions. Well, was it your term suspect or was it George Zimmerman's? And she replied it was George Zimmerman's. So it's just not the inconsistencies, and I suspect there will be some, but it's what he said and how he said it.
And Mark, I want to bring you into this, but first I want to play a portion of the interrogation tape. This is in this particular segment. Zimmerman states that he held Trayvon Martin down after he shot him.
Once I shot him, I holstered my firearm and I got on top of him and I held his hands on him because he was still talking. And I said, "Stay down, don't move." And then somebody comes out, and I couldn't see. There was a flashlight in my head, so I asked if it was a police officer. And he said no, it was a witness, but he was calling the police. And I said, "The police are on their way. They should be here already," because I had called. And he's like, "I'm calling the police." And I said, "I don't need you to call the police. I need you to help me with this guy."
Mark, what was the significance of that when you listened to that?
I think we're going to find out that it's one of the major pieces in this entire case. I think the first thing that we have to look at is that everybody who's talked, who has said that they've spoken to Zimmerman, has said that he did not act crazy, that he did not act overly excited, that he was relatively calm. There's nothing so far to show that he evinced a depraved mind, which is in fact a standard that they have to meet in order to convict a second-degree murder. Most significantly, though, this statement that you just heard, which seems to have been missed by so many, George Zimmerman is saying that he, after he shot Trayvon Martin, rolled atop him and then spread out his hands, spread out his arms. That becomes consistent with the first slew of of witnesses that the state had brought in, which said that they saw George Zimmerman atop Trayvon Martin. So now we've heard an explanation of why some of those witnesses had said that they saw him, him being Zimmerman atop Trayvon Martin. And then you heard the most powerful of all witnesses, Mr. Good, say that initially he was there because it was outside of his door, and he saw he saw him straddling and pounding and grounding him. So now you're seeing all this linked together, and this is in the state's case, which should be where they dominate, and they don't seem to be doing that.
All right, Mark, Sonny, we're going to get back to you. Obviously, we're looking at that little square there. That is inside the courtroom. The trial to resume in about 10 minutes or so. We're going to bring that live as soon as it starts again. And the Zimmerman trial has raised a lot of questions about whether or not it is ever okay to use certain racial slurs. Our Don Lemon, he is actually tackling that issue. You're not going to want to miss this. It's a special report called The N-Word. That is tonight at 7 Eastern here on CNN. Oh. The lawyers are at the bench. I want to bring in Mark here. Mark, is there the fact that you do not have Trayvon Martin here to tell the kind of details and lay out what happened here, but you have so much information coming from Zimmerman, how does that impact what the jurors believe in terms of how this played out?
Well, I think it's a great advantage to the defense and a disadvantage to the state. I think you have a bulldog of a prosecutor. He's shown himself to be tenacious and basically a pit bull. And I think he would have a field day if he gets George Zimmerman, who has at times proved less than credible with his previous statements, either on TV or in court. And I think that the prosecutor would love to be able to cross-examine Zimmerman. Zimmerman has a break here. He made all these statements, and now they're being played in the prosecutor's case in chief. And so now there's not even going to be, even though jurors are never supposed to pay attention, if a defendant doesn't take the stand, we all know that at times some of them do. Here, the beauty for the defense is they've got a real live, real-time George Zimmerman, thinner, leaner, acting calm, no attorney present, and giving his version. That inures to the benefit of the defense. Now, what the state is forced to at that point do is lay all of Zimmerman's prior statements, each atop of one another, and try to point out the inconsistencies to show that he's not credible and his story shouldn't be believed. But that's a difficult road for them to travel simply because they don't have the ability to trip him up on the stand. And I think this also shows one reason why the defense did not have a stand your ground hearing. They knew that they would have to put George Zimmerman on the stand, and they opted not to because there was no way to even consider winning that, and I think it would have been a hard road anyway, if in fact Zimmerman didn't take the stand on that. So I think we're seeing some of this playing out.
All right, let's listen back in.